Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2020 horror thriller Antebellum. Now, the horror in this film, I don't think it should be put first. In fact, I honestly think this is more of a mystery thriller than it is a horror movie. There are some absolutely horrific things in this film, and they really do stick to you and really do have an impact. But it's more of a mystery thriller than anything else. And despite the fact that this film is absolutely amazing and awesome at times, it just doesn't work. For me personally, Antebellum was a massive disappointment, and the reason why is something that I've noticed that a lot of films nowadays suffer from is first-time directors thinking that they're also going to be really good at being first-time screenwriters. And that's something that really prevents films like Antebellum from living up to their full potential, because you have directors who think that, oh, I know how to direct. I've directed a bunch of short films, and I've written screenplays for my short films, so I'm prepared to write my own feature film. But it's a completely different medium, and I feel that these films are held back by these directors deciding they're going to do everything. They're going to put all this stuff on their plate, when really they would benefit even more from not going that route. You can be like, for instance, you can write a story, write a treatment or something, but then bring someone else on board who is more experienced in that arena. I know some people will look at, we'll look at Jordan Peele, but Jordan Peele had been writing sketches, he'd been doing tons of stuff as a writer before he even wrote something like Get Out. So it wasn't one of those things where, it was his first time writing in general for this kind of thing. He had enough experience over the years. Writing a few short films is not the same as being someone who has been so influential on a TV show that lasted for numerous seasons. So, yeah, I had to get that off my chest, because this is a prime example of that happening, and it's a shame, because this film really could have been a great movie if you had a great screenplay to go along with the great direction and great characters, which ties into the screenplay. So the film was directed by Gerard and Christopher Renz. And like I said, they're first-time directors. And you wouldn't know it, because the direction in this is really well done. They definitely know their way behind a camera. They know how to use tracking shots and zooms, and they know how to create a certain kind of atmosphere and mood. I have no problems at all with the direction for this film. There are a lot of shots in this film that are really quite breathtaking. The opening sequence, the tracking shot through the plantation, showing the bright side, the idealistic side of what a lot of people think that plantation life is like, and then the darker, more torturous, and really terrible and genuinely horrific side underneath that is the reality of it all. That there are two sides to the plantation. There's the side that is idealistic, and then there's the other side in the slave camp that is absolutely terrifying and shows some of the worst of human nature. So I love that opening sequence. It really sets this film up in a really grand way. Like, you think like, this movie's gonna be fantastic, and then it continues with this really terrifying and tense and and chilling sequence where this African American woman is hunted down by these southern these Confederate soldiers on the plantation and murdered brutally in front of her lover, who's forced to watch. And it's a really hard scene to watch, but it really does work because that's what the film is trying to go for. It's trying to show you the horrors of slavery. I always felt that if they handle it right, a film that showcases the genuine real horror of slavery could be a really good horror movie. Because I mean, folks, the torture and the demeaning nature and the absolute just nihilistic and inhuman treatment of African Americans, or honestly other races too, because I mean, slavery is something that has affected a lot of people from a lot of different races over the years and over time. And it's really brutal. And like I said earlier, it shows some of the worst of us, of mankind. And if you can make that work into a horror film, that's some of the most compelling and gripping horror there is. And that's one of the reasons why the film's so disappointing, is because you have moments like this that are really powerful and genuinely terrifying, but then the rest of the film isn't really on the same level. A big part of why that sequence works so well is absolutely 100% the score by Nate Wonder and Roman Gian Arthur. This soundtrack, this score is absolutely spectacular. It is really fantastic and one of the best scores that I've heard this year, especially the opening theme that's using a lot of classical music as an inspiration. It is a really impressive tour de force of music. And it carries the intense sequences in the beginning of the film. There's no dialogue. There really isn't anything other than this score and what's happening on screen. And it's so effective. And then the Confederate soldiers and the people who work on the plantation or run the plantation, they open their mouths and then things go downhill. So that ties into one of the biggest problems I have with this movie: the characters and how they're written. So with the Confederate soldiers and with the plantation owners, they are written in a way that makes them completely inauthentic, incredibly one-dimensional, and in a lot of ways, totally cartoonish. Like foghorn, leghorn kind of proportions here. They are hyper-aggressive, they are hyper-racist, they don't really have any sort of character development or depth other than the fact that they're a bunch of racist assholes. That's really all it is. And the film does a good job making you hate these people, hate these racist pieces of shit, but that only goes so far, because there's a lot of surface level stuff going on here. Surface level analysis of these type of individuals. If you want a better example of, at least to me, what racist Americans are really like, at least as a whole. I'm not saying that there aren't people like this that are featured in this movie that are just fucking evil and just straight up awful. But there is a racist that is just as dangerous and just as destructive that is not really presented in this particular film. And that's the one that on the outside is nice and personable and seems like somebody that you can trust, and but they are deep down a really awful person when they're around other racists, when they are in their comfort zone. So they put on, a happy face, or they put on this facade of, being a really good natured person, but then there's this really darker side underneath. And a good example of that is the movie Betrayed with Tom Berenger. Tom Berenger's character in particular. So I feel if this movie had characters like that, it would be on a really different level. And it would make these villains more fleshed out. And it would also help the film really make a better statement that really does resonate on a deeper level in terms of how, let's just say, how diverse racism itself is. Because it's something a lot of people might not want to think about, but I mean, in order to understand your enemy and the problem, you kind of need to go a little bit deeper into it. And you kind of need to show different sides instead of just showing one side. But that's just me personally. I know it's controversial, but this is the kind of wheelhouse, this is the kind of stuff that this film is working with. So I don't feel that it's out of left field or uncalled for to have this kind of discussion when it comes to this film and this the approach that it particularly has with these characters. Because the way that they're portrayed is very cartoonish and over the top and seems like it's something from a satire, but the movie itself isn't a satire, so it just doesn't really have the same impact if it took a more balanced take, a more realistic take on, these type of individuals. And that the lack of a realistic take also applies to the main character in Veronica Henley, because the way that character is written is when you get to the portion of the film when it is about her in modern day, because that's the second act of the film. After the first 38 minutes, she's in modern day, and it shows her family life and what she's been doing with her crusade and so on and so forth, and her platform. And a lot of it's some really good stuff in terms of, what she is doing. And I support it wholeheartedly. I think that they could have done a better job with that, though. I feel that a lot of it just seemed like a bunch of buzzwords, and I feel that they really could have injected some kind of character flaw with her character that she could overcome and learn from throughout the course of the movie. So then there's more of an arc for the character, because there really isn't an arc with this character, which I feel that also hurts the film, because you're following this character around for the majority of the movie, and by the end of it, it doesn't seem like she's changed that much, other than she's been through a really harrowing and intense experience. But that's just how I personally viewed it. But yeah, she has this perfect family life. Everything seems like it's the best it could possibly ever be. She's on this upward trajectory with her career. And, it seems like everybody gets along with her except for, some instances of some people who were, being low-key racist. But other than that, you don't really see a character that really feels like they are also three-dimensional. So the protagonist is completely one-dimensional in how it is written and how it is handled, and so are the antagonists. So you have a weak lead as a result because you don't really latch onto this character as if she was a real person. And then you have the antagonists, and they're weak because you don't really latch onto them either as real people. So as a result, there's really not any strong characters in this film, despite the best attempts of some of the actors in the movie trying to give it their all. In particular, Janelle Monáe, she is absolutely wonderful in this. I thought she did a really good job, despite the fact that there really wasn't a lot to this character that she was portraying. So yeah, characters are so important to any film and to any story, and Antebellum is no exception. And if the characters were just written better in a more dynamic and a more interesting way, then I feel that this film would have been a lot better just with better characters. But even with better characters, it still will not live up to its full potential because of how the story is structured. So you have the first 38 minutes, which are the plantation horror, establishing what you think is the current timeline for this movie. But due to the twist that happens in the third act, you find out that that's not the case. And the second half, which is incredibly long and dull and boring because the family life and the nightlife of Veronica Henley and friends is not interesting. It's not intriguing. The screenplay does not do a good job making you really that interested in the proceedings, in what's going on. Like I said, if you had some sort of character flaw, then you can make that a little bit more interesting. And then when she is going through this horror, and once she comes out of it, then you would have the moment of realization, and you'd have the moment where she grows as a character and changes and shifts in a way that makes her character stronger. The character, though, the way it's portrayed in the film is just, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like on steroids, because she's just super strong for the most part throughout the entire movie, other than the moment where she kind of doesn't want to rebel against her captors, and it takes some outside influence from some new people that are brought on board or brought into the slave camp for her to kick things into gear and finally decide to rise up. But other than that, that's really the only conflict that you really have with the character. And that leads into the third act, because the second act, really, honestly, pretty boring, despite the attempts to try to make things kind of funny with her best friend, Dawn, played by Gabourey Sidibe. Or I think it's Sidibe. I think I could be wrong. I apologize if I butchered her last name. But they try to make that stuff funny, but I didn't personally find it that funny. But then again, that's just me and my sense of humor. And they also establish the character played by Jena Malone, and this is where the film also kind of loses its tone, because and things don't really click. The second part of the film really feels like it's from a different movie, and this is no more evident than in the elevator scene, which looks like it's something straight out of a horror movie. You got this creepy little girl who's like going shh, and acting like she's, one of those stereotypical creepy ghost kids from a supernatural horror film. And when you find out what the twist is, this sequence sticks out like a sore thumb and makes zero sense for the tone or the overall approach that the film is trying to have. How did the girl get there? Why is she there? None of it's ever explained. She just shows up with her teddy bear, acts creepy, and then disappears. You're like, was she a ghost? And none of that is ever really answered or explained. She just shows up, acts creepy, and that's it. And this is also when you start to see where the film is going to go when it comes to the twist, because you see characters who look exactly the same as other characters from the slave camp plantation opening of the film. And then you get to the third act, which is just honestly the twist and Veronica's escape. And the moment when she and the other slaves rise up and fend for themselves and essentially stop the horror. And I know some people like this twist. Some people thought it was surprising, was shocking. To me, it's just a lot of retreads. It's the same kind of stuff that you saw in The Village, or it's, in essence, kind of the same plot as The Hunt. But unlike The Hunt, it's not handled in a tongue-in-cheek way. So it's all handled super seriously. And I think for some people, it's really compelling because they believe that this could actually happen because of the situation that our country is in right now when it comes to all the social unrest and things like that. But I don't really, for me personally, I don't buy it. I call bullshit. I don't think this would happen, as bad as some things are. Because things have been legitimately worse in the past, and I don't know of any recorded instance of this being a reality then. But, you know, I could be wrong. But I just don't really, I didn't buy The Purge, and I don't buy The Hunt being a real thing. So I don't necessarily buy, you know, this scenario either. Plus, I mean, if this is supposed to be taken seriously, then why the hell haven't more African Americans escape from this plantation, considering how weak the security is? Also, why weren't more people rebelling to begin with? If this wasn't one of those situations where they were stuck in the past and they couldn't just rebel, or, you know, I get it, like, oh, they're at gunpoint and they're intimidated and blah de blah. But even with all of that, you would think there would be more characters, there'd be more people who would be like, fuck this, I'm no slave, motherfucker, you know, that kind of stuff. And there was a little bit of that with the professor guy, but I honestly think they could have used a little bit more of that. I understand why they didn't do that, because, oh, it's all, we gotta protect the twist. But you know what? With this kind of movie, if you're gonna have that kind of twist, maybe just don't even try to protect it as much. Just, you know, make it so it's obvious. Like The Hunt didn't have it wasn't a twist. Like, you figured it out early on in the movie. So I think honestly, this film might have been better if it doesn't try to hide the twist and try to trick you like M. Night Shyamalan. But that's just me. That's just how I view it. Because I just don't take this seriously. I mean, I took the stuff in the beginning really seriously because that's horrific and that's absolutely horrendous on every single possible level. But the idea that this is happening now, even in a fictional sense, seems like something straight out of Fantasyland. And also, if you're going to have this kind of twist, have better characters. Have a better structure. You know, don't have a really dull and boring second half that almost feels kind of pointless in a lot of ways. It's just there to provide a little bit more character development. That's really, seems like that's all that it is. Because some of the characters that are introduced in that second half of this film, they don't even show up again for the rest of the movie. So you have the third act where everything is happening in reality. It's some plantation that's built behind the Antebellum tourist park. That's one that I'm like, what? How did the FBI not figure this out by now? Okay, alright. And then it's leading up to Veronica's uprising and her gaining the courage to fight back, and along with the professor. And the professor character, another character that's very weak. That character is not developed well enough at all. So by the time he has this sacrifice at the end of the movie, you feel nothing, because the film didn't bother to really make him feel like a human being. Just seemed like he was barely even there. Another one-dimensional character. And then also in this particular part, the film gets really heavy-handed. Like, it had some moments like that in the second half with the buzzwords and, you know, how its approach to politics and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go any deeper into that, but I'll just say I honestly disagreed with how they handled it. I felt that it was too one-sided. But then you have this third part where it's so heavy-handed. I mean, might as well be hitting people in the face with a 2x4 with some of the messages here. I mean, Veronica is riding away, trying to get out of her predicament. And here's another thing: like, she escapes, but it's not established that anybody else does. But it's insinuated that that's a fact, because when she escapes and she gets the phone earlier and has a way to trace her location, that of course sends the cops there. And so, you know, the place is disbanded and whatever, and so on and so forth. So you assume that those other African Americans who were enslaved were set free. But it's just one of those things that's like, okay, alright. So she's escaping on horseback, and Jena Malone is like shooting at her with a 6-shooter. Although there's like this other guy who has like a semi-automatic rifle and firing at her. And they really, honestly, could have done more with that. Of having, you know, these people with modern weaponry in what is supposed to be the past. But nope. Just that one scene, Jena Malone's chewing the scenery up and with her southern accent and shooting at Veronica, and Veronica winds up killing her by tying a rope around her neck and dragging her head into the statue of Robert E. Lee. This is the kind of stuff that if it's a satire, it would work more. But it's not, so it just comes across as horribly heavy-handed. Really, just stone-handed. Just like, come on. Like, you know, lead. Like a hand made out of lead. But I have to admit, I mean, it was satisfying still seeing that character get killed. As well as the other, you know, racist assholes who got burned burned to death. That was a definite crowd-pleasing moment. But it would have been even more crowd-pleasing if these characters had more depth to them. And, you know, they felt more like real people. But that's just me personally. And then you have the ending with this, where she escapes. She's on horseback. Everything's in slow motion. She's riding through the reenactment, a Civil War reenactment on the grounds of Antebellum. And I have to admit, it's a well-shot sequence. The song that's played in the background, I think it's called Home Soon or Coming Home or something like that. It's a really powerful track, and I like the instrumental that is used in the background. It just is kind of meh for me in the end, though, despite how much I really like that song and how well shot that sequence is, because I didn't really buy into the twist. I wasn't really that big on it. I gotta be honest, folks. I wanted a time travel film. I wanted a time travel supernatural horror kind of movie. Maybe not a supernatural horror, but at least a time travel thing, because I think that would have been more interesting. A take on that novel, Kindred, but with a horror bent. I think that would have been legitimately good. I think it really could have had potential to be a great film. But instead, you just get another kind of village movie, M. Night Shyamalan twist, and it just didn't do it for me. And then you have these characters that are very weak and aren't strong, and then you just have this very fractured way of storytelling. And then some of the ways that things are set up, leading up to the twist, don't really make much sense, like the girl in the elevator and a few other moments. And also the way that things are kind of edited, it doesn't really track well. Like, it doesn't really compute to me. Like, some of the ways that especially the second and the third half are connected are really wonky. And yeah, I mean, the film is just disappointing. It's a disappointing movie. Despite some legitimately good things. The direction by Gerard Bush and Christopher Renz. Really great score by Nate Wonder and Roman Gianarthur. Gorgeous cinematography by Pedro Luque. Some decent editing by John Axelrad. I think there are some moments where it's a little bit choppy, a little bit too choppy for me. Some great performances, especially by Janelle Monáe. I thought, trying to think, yeah, Jack Huston, I thought he was really good as Captain Jasper. He was just basically an asshole with a capital A, but he played that role well. Like, I really wanted to punch that guy in the throat. I really hated that guy. Jena Malone, though, was just I didn't buy. She was just fucking ridiculous, but she was at least having fun. So I'll give her that. I think she would have worked better in a satire, in a social satire kind of movie in the vein of The Hunt, that character. But placing her in this kind of movie, it doesn't really work nearly as well. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the cast, fine. I mean, Kiersey Clemons as Julia, although she really has nothing to do. And neither did Gabourey Sidibe. She was just the funny friend of Veronica, and that was it. I mean, there wasn't any performances that were particularly, like, really bad in this movie. So the acting wasn't really a problem. Just all comes down to the screenplay. It comes down to just how, not necessarily half-baked, but just how it just wasn't written in a way that it was able to live up to its full potential. And in the end, the film kind of immolated itself because it just wasn't able to rise above its flaws when it comes to its storytelling. Jordan Peele, this ain't. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on Antebellum. I hope you enjoyed my review. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.